So let's talk about the repechage rounds at the Paris Olympic Games later on this summer. And you may not have heard about repechage rounds or even know what the word repechage means, but we're going to dive into all that. But just as a quick overview, World Athletics is introducing a new way for athletes to qualify through to the semifinals in a few select events at the Olympic Games in Paris this summer. That's going to be through the repechage rounds. So today I want to dive in and try and answer three specific questions. First off, what are the repechage rounds and what is the format going to be like at the Paris Olympics this summer? If we actually had the repechage rounds back in history at World Championships or Olympics, would we have seen an athlete go on to win a medal, maybe even gold? And then finally, at these Olympics in the summer, could we see an athlete have to compete at the repechage rounds and then go on to win a medal, maybe gold, at the Paris Olympics? So starting this year at the Paris Olympic Games, we're going to see the repechage rounds for all individual track events from 200 all the way up to 1500 meters, including the 110-meter hurdles and the 400-meter hurdles. And that means that athletes who don't qualify by place in the heats, meaning they don't get a big Q, will go on to compete in the repechage rounds. There, they'll have another chance to qualify for the semifinals by running again against all the athletes who also did not initially qualify. For example, if the 200-meter qualifying is the top three from each heat goes on to the semifinals, if you finish 4th, 5th, 6th, etc., you'll have to run another 200-meter round the next day to try and qualify for the semifinals again. Again, no more time qualifiers in any of these track events. So what that means is that in all track events from 200 up to 1500, including the hurdles, we're going to see 4 rounds contested: the heats, the repechage, the semifinals, and the final. But in the heats, if you do get a big Q, you won't have to worry about the repechage rounds. So only athletes who don't get that big Q are going to have to contest 4 rounds at the Olympic Games this summer. Now, the 100-meter dash isn't included in the repechage rounds because there's already an opening round heat, so they don't have to go through 4 rounds. And then also the longer distances are not included, the steeple, 5K, and 10K, as running multiple rounds is going to take a toll on the athlete's body, so they're not going to have repechage rounds there. And then finally, the schedule for the repechage rounds is of course going to depend on the different events, right? The 100-meter hurdles and the 200 meters are going to be different in terms of the repechage rounds compared to the 800 and the 1500, just again to consider the toll that it's going to take on the athletes' bodies. But what this means is that every single athlete is going to compete at least twice at the Olympics when talking about the 200 up to the 1500, as well as the 110-meter hurdles, 100-meter hurdles, and the 400-meter hurdles. Now, as with anything that's new in the sport of track and field, there's always some pros and some cons. First off, some of those pros. Well, athletes are going to get a second chance if they make a mistake, if they don't qualify, if they pace things wrong. They're going to get another chance to try and qualify to those semifinals, which we wouldn't see in previous championships. Also, on top of that, it makes things a little bit more exciting, especially when we're talking about some tactical races like the 800 and the 1500, right? You might see athletes playing off each other, maybe eyeing where they're at. It's going to make things a lot more exciting as we come from the heats and then also in those repechage rounds. Also, this could make things a lot more exciting where you might see an athlete who, fails in the heats, they hit a hurdle, they fall to a track, but then they're able to come back into the semifinals, maybe make it into the final, and then maybe actually get on the podium. There's going to be some big comeback stories through the repechage rounds. And then finally, in my opinion, we just get to watch more track. Who doesn't want to see more track? Who doesn't want to see more competition? I think it's going to be a really exciting opportunity for us to see more athletes competing on the track. Now, what are some of those cons? Well, of course, it does make the schedule just a little bit longer. Adding in another round of competition across all these events is going to add to the time schedule. Though the competition is still happening within 10 days as previous championships, we're still going to add to that schedule. Now, it's also going to be more racing for these athletes. Yes, an athlete may not qualify through. They're going to have to compete in the repechage rounds. That's going to take a toll on their body. They're going to go into the semifinals possibly a little bit more tired. So that's definitely going to be tough on the athletes. And then finally, it does slightly devalue the heats and having to kind of be ready on the day, right? Every athlete is training to be ready for this one moment for the Olympic Games. And if you're giving everyone the opportunity to compete in the repechage rounds, then maybe someone can kind of sandbag it in the heats knowing that they have another chance in the repechage to qualify for the semifinals. Now, those are just some of the pros and cons as we look at the repechage rounds, but the structure is in place and it's going to be playing out at the Olympic Games this summer. But with that, let's take a look back through history and try and identify if the repechage rounds existed at previous Olympics or previous World Championships. Are there any athletes who might have gone on to win a medal or maybe win a gold medal again at the Olympic Games or the World Championships?
Wait, real quick, are you just learning about repechage rounds for the first time? Well, you could have already learned about them if you were subscribed to the Lap Count newsletter. The Lap Count presented by Citius Mag is all about keeping you in the loop with what's going on around the culture of track and field. And of course, with some times and a few results sprinkled here and there. But check the description to get the Lap Count newsletter every Wednesday directly to your email. Let's get back to it.
Now, the most notable athlete that might already be on your mind is Shericka Jackson from Jamaica in the 200 meters. At the Tokyo Olympic Games in 2021, Shericka Jackson was probably one of the favorites for not only a medal, but potentially a gold medal in the 200-meter dash. But she notably kind of jogged through and didn't expend so much energy through the 200-meter heats, and unfortunately didn't qualify to move on to the semifinals. She literally missed making the semifinals by 4 thousandths of a second, and she's spoken about how she does not want that to happen again, especially as we look forward to the Paris Olympic Games this year. And her getting on the podium was not really far-fetched. She already got a bronze medal in the 100 meters. She actually had already run 21.8 seconds in the 200. Now, Elaine Thompson-Herah did win the 200-meter gold in 21.5, which was historic at the moment, but not saying Shericka would have definitely won gold, but she would have challenged Elaine, and it just speaks to the depth of the 200 and how if we had the repechage rounds, Shericka Jackson probably would have been on that podium. But Shericka Jackson from 2021 is not the only example. If we look back through history, another name you might be thinking of is Usain Bolt in 2004.
Entering the Athens Olympic Games, Bolt had run a best of 19.93 seconds in the 200. At the time, it was the second fastest time in the world, only behind eventual Olympic champion Shawn Crawford. But at those Olympics, he significantly underperformed, only running 21.05 for 5th place in his heat.
So technically, he could have gone to the repechage rounds.
And if he even replicated his season's best of 19.93, that would have gotten him a silver medal in the final. But he was still young and still rising, so I can understand if someone isn't as confident that he would have managed through the rounds as well. Additionally, I do acknowledge that Usain Bolt picked up a hamstring injury prior to the Olympic Games, which led to him pulling out of the World Junior Championships and of course hindered him as he went through the heats in Athens. But I did still want to provide this example just as it relates to the repechage rounds and how they could have affected previous athletes at Olympics or World Championships. Now, here's another example.
Going back all the way to 2009 at the Berlin World Championships, Angelo Taylor from the United States in the 400-meter hurdles would have had a decent shot to actually get on the podium at those World Championships. First off, he was a 2-time Olympic champion from 2000 as well as 2008. So he just won the gold medal at the Beijing Olympics. Also, he had a 47.25 personal best, which made him number 8 all time. And again, he just ran that to win the gold medal at the Olympic Games back in 2008. He was also the 8th fastest athlete in the world entering those World Championships in Berlin, where he ran 48.30 seconds. So he was one of the top athletes and was very likely on pace to make the final. But in the heats of those World Championships in Berlin 2009, Angelo Taylor unfortunately paced things wrong and wasn't able to qualify, ended up finishing 4th place in his heat and didn't move on to the semifinals. And similar to Shericka Jackson in 2021, Angelo Taylor missed the semifinals by 1/100th of a second, literally by just a hair. Now, 2 years after that, Christine Ohuruogu from the United Kingdom in the 400-meter dash, she was another one who very likely could have gotten onto the podium at the 2011 World Championships in Daegu. She was a 2007 World Champion, the 2008 Olympic champion, both in the 400 meters, but at the Daegu World Championships, she actually false started in her heat and was unable to contest through the rounds. Now, she hadn't actually been running very well throughout the entire season, but Ohuruogu is known to peak and known to perform well at those global championships. So who knows, if she didn't false start, if she had a repechage round, she could have not only gone on to the final, but maybe gone on to the podium once again. Fast forward to 2013, and another Jamaican, this time in Kaliese Spencer, she also missed out in the 400-meter hurdles. Now, prior to 2013, Kaliese Spencer actually got 4th place at the 2009 as well as the 2011 World Championships, and she got 4th at the 2012 Olympic Games, but that was actually upgraded to the bronze medal later on retroactively. So she was one of the top athletes in the 400-meter hurdles at that point. And in the heats in Moscow, she actually won her heat very, very comfortably. Now, it was later identified that she unfortunately didn't clear the hurdle properly with her trail leg and was unfortunately DQ'd despite winning her heat. So it's very likely that we would have seen Kaliese Spencer not only make the final, but also get on the podium at the Moscow World Championships in 2013. Now, finally, I want to shout out 2 women in the 800 meters who would have potentially won medals at the 2015 World Championships in the 800 meters. First off, Janeth Jepkosgei. Now, she was the gold medalist in the 800 at the 2007 World Championships. She got the silver medal in Beijing at the 2008 Olympic Games, and she also got the silver medal at the 2009 and 2011 World Championships in the 800 meters. So she was extremely dominant in the event, but at those Beijing World Championships, she had a very, very tight heat where she missed making the semifinals by 0.05 of a second. Extremely close and wasn't able to move on to the semifinals. If we did have the repechage rounds, she likely would have been able to go on and qualify. to make the semifinals and potentially be in contention for a medal in the finals. At those same 2015 Worlds, Montano from the United States, she also missed out on making the semifinals, really because she fell to the track. She got tripped up and fell to the track. But she was one of the top contenders for a medal at those World Championships. She had a bronze medal from 2011, 2012, and 2013, and all of them were retroactive because of disqualifications. But again, she actually got those medals. But unfortunately, like I said, she tripped up and fell in the heats. And again, she would have likely been a very strong contender for a medal if she was able to get to the semifinals and eventually the finals in Beijing. If she had those repechage rounds, she would have been in that conversation. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just a couple athletes that I was able to identify through history, but go in the comments and let me know if there's any other athletes who, if they would have had the repechage rounds at the Olympic Games or the World Championships in the past, maybe they would have had a chance to actually get on the podium again at the Olympics or the World Champs. And just to be clear, the repechage rounds means you didn't make it out the heats and you have another chance to try and make it into the semifinals. So there's a couple examples that wouldn't fit this bill throughout history. For example, Michael Johnson, entering the 1992 Olympic Games in the 200, he was one of the favorites for a gold medal, but he actually already made it through to the semifinals, so surpassed the heat, so that wouldn't have counted. So let's end off and actually look forward to these Paris Olympics this summer. With the repechage rounds, are there any athletes who might have a chance to actually not qualify through the heats, compete in the repechage rounds, and then go on to actually medal or even win a gold medal at these Olympics in Paris? Well, this is essentially impossible to predict, right? We're essentially thinking of an athlete who might fall to the track or might hit a hurdle or might pace things wrong, right? If they're a gold medal favorite or a medal favorite, right, they're very likely going to be able to really get things right going through the rounds. Yes, spoke about Shericka Jackson, but that is a kind of one-off, case that we really can't predict at this moment. And in reality, all these kind of freak accidents, falling to the track, hitting a hurdle, pacing things wrong, these can happen to pretty much any athlete. So again, it's really, really hard to predict if this would happen. But where I do think this is most likely to happen is probably in the 800 or the 1500 meters. And the most likely reason is because of incorrect pacing. A lot of athletes might not be able to judge things properly on how fast the race is going or how slow the race is going or how it's going relative to some of the other heats. So I think in the 800 and the 1500, athletes might not pace things correctly, might end up getting, 4th place or 5th place, and then get to the repechage rounds and then eventually be able to qualify through to the semifinals. But I think it's even more likely specifically in the men's 800 meters. Why? Well, that event is completely wide open, right? For example, on the women's 800 meter side, you have Mary Moore, you have Keely Hodgkinson, right? Those are probably the top players when talking about the medals going into the Olympics. On the men's 1500 meter side, Jakob Ingebrigtsen, Yara Naguse, Josh Kerr, right? Women's 1500, Faith Kipyegon, Gudaf Sagai, right? Sifan Hassan, Ellie St. Pierre, right? A lot of these women are really, really in contention across the board. Men's 800 meters, I mean, that event is completely wide open. So I think that's the most likely case where we see some athlete who, again, just doesn't pace things correctly in the heats, has to go into the repechage rounds and has to qualify through the semifinals there, and then goes on to get onto the podium, potentially goes on to actually get a medal. Who knows? We can very likely see something like that happen. And just to further highlight how the men's 800 meters is pretty much completely wide open, look at the last 3 global championships from the Olympics and the last 2 Worlds. We've only seen Marco Arop from Canada and Emmanuel Korir from Kenya actually win medals at these past 3 global championships. Everyone else has been a new medalist at these global championships. Now, is it likely to happen? Honestly, I don't know. Again, we can't really predict these things, but I think the 800 meters for the men is the most likely to see someone come out of the repechage rounds and actually win a medal, considering how competitive the event is, how wide open the event is, and how easy it is to potentially get pacing wrong. So with that, let me know what you think about the implementation of the repechage rounds as we lead into the Paris Olympics this summer. What are some of the pros and cons that I mentioned? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? And then also throughout history, are there any athletes that I didn't mention that if the repechage rounds actually did exist, they would have gone on to win a medal at the World Championships or Olympics? And then finally, what is the most likely event where we might see an athlete have to compete in the repechage rounds this summer in Paris, but then potentially go on to win a medal, either gold or bronze or silver? Let me know what you think. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Be back again next time. Thanks for watching, y'all.